It's time to create an enemy for our game. In this section, we will construct the enemy scene. In the next section, we'll animate it. And then finally, we will configure it to interact with the player by damaging the player, and we will allow the player also to damage the enemy. Let's make a start. Scene. New scene. New 2D scene. Immediately, I'm going to control click and change the type to a character body. 2D. Double click to change the name, and I'm going to call it Robot Crab. I'm immediately going to Command S to save, and I'm going to create a new folder called Enemies. And I'm going to save it in there. Save. All right. It wants a collision shape, but let's do a sprite next. So click the plus, sprite. And the sprite wants a texture. So if we go into Art, Sprite Sheets, Robot Crab. And again, we've done this before. We have to tell it how many frames we've got vertically and how many frames we've got horizontally. And we're a 3x3 sprite here. So we go, that's the wrong thing, animation, 3 horizontal frames, 3 and 3 vertical frames. 3. Back to normal. All right, good. Let's do the collision shape. So little plus, collision shape. Zoom in a bit to make this easier. I've zoomed in a lot. We need to do the shape. So rectangle. And it's up there. So I want to bring my collision shape down, and I've got snapping on. But look, the bottom is completely lined up with the bottom of my character. Will that work? That way. Not quite, but that's good enough. This is the collision shape we're going to use to stop ourselves falling through the floor and to enable us to bump into walls and bump into the character, things like that. So that's fine. Right. Now we need to give our enemy the ability to detect the player. We've done this before with the hazard, so you might remember that. If not, you're going to get a lot of practice now. So the first thing we need for a player detector is an area 2D. So click plus, area 2D, looking good. I'm going to start with the one over here, so that's the front. So I'm going to double click, change it to player detector front. That looks good. And you can see, if I click on it, our little cross is here. So I'm going to move it to there. All right. Making sure, see, Robot Crab's origin is there. Player Detector Front's origin is there. It always puts the origin on top if it's drawn lower down the scene tree, so that's fine. I'm going to Control D to duplicate that. Control D. I'm going to double click, change it to Player Detector Rear. Now it's drawn it here, look, immediately over the top of Player Detector Front, so I should be able to just click and drag. I have to turn off snapping and put it there in the middle of that pincer. So rear is in the middle of that pincer. Front is in the middle of that pincer. Move it down slightly. So we've got player detector rear over there, player detector front over there. I'll duplicate player detector front. Change it to player detector head. And if I slide over, it should have it. Player detector head. I'm going to put it right in the middle of its 2 eyes there. So player detector head is in the middle of the 2 eyes. Front is on the front pincer. Rear is on the rear pincer. Okay, cool. We've got these warnings because our area 2Ds need collision shapes. So let's go into there. So I'm on player detector front, click the plus, collision shape 2D, double click, wants a shape, new rectangle shape, and then we just shrink it to the size of our pincer. Looks good. Same thing with player detector head. Click the little plus, collision shape 2D already selected. This time I want a circle, so new circle shape, and I just bring it in by moving this little dot here. I'm also going to click on the origin, player detector head, click on the little cross and bring it down. Make the circle smaller. That looks good. Check they're not overlapping. They are slightly. Yeah, that looks good. So you can see that you can make the enemy easier or harder to kill by changing the size of this player detector here. This is the one that's going to detect the player stomping on the character to destroy it. Okay, so you can make it bigger to make it easier, make it smaller to make it harder. I've made it small and made it quite low because I don't want it to be triggered when the player jumps over the character. I want it to be quite hard to hit. Okay. Player detector rear, and the same thing. Click the little plus, collision shape, over here to shape, new rectangle shape 2D, and just shrink it to the size of the pincer. Looking good. And that is our enemy scene constructed. So I'm going to Control S to save that. Let's wire up these player detectors so they can detect the player. First thing I need is a script on the root node. So click the little script icon here. And I don't want a basic movement script. I just want a default script. Good. Saving it in the same place as our node, so I click create. Looking good. We've got the ready function, we've got the process function. We do need all of those. But what I'm going to do now is just connect the player detectors to the parent node. And for that, I'm sure you remember, we need signals. So I've selected player detector front. Go into node. And we go area shape entered. So we go area body entered. Connect it to the parent, which we've done. Connect. We get our little function, and I'm just going to print damaging player. Delete that and delete that. All right. Sorry, no, I need to do another one. Body exited. Connect it to robot crab. And again, print. Copy that. No longer damaging player. I think it's about time we did rig up the GUI. So we'll rig up a life bar and enable the enemy to really damage the player in the next section, I think, once we've got the enemy done. All right, I just need to repeat that twice for player detector head. So into node, signals, body entered, connect it to the parent, damaging player. So Control C, Command V. Body exited. Connect it to robot crab. And now we're no longer damaging the player, so I will copy that line. Move it up a bit. In fact, that's wrong, isn't it? I don't want that, so I'm going to remove it. So I just click on player detector head, exited and disconnect, and I can delete that. And I don't want to print damaging the player when I land on the head. I want to disappear from the scene, so I just want to do Q3. Q3. Looking good. Sorry about that. All right, finally. Player detector rear. Body entered. Connect to robot crab. And we want to print damaging the player. Move it up. Player detector rear, body exited. Connect to robot crab. And we want to print no longer damaging the player. All right. Save that all. Back into 2D view. Let's instance it into our scene just to see if what we've done so far is working. So if I've saved it, go into level template, and it can just appear down here. What I do need to do before I do that, click on robot crab and click on the grouping icon so I don't accidentally move things I don't want to move. So click that, appeared there, go into level template and instance in the enemy. It appears up there, so I'm just going to move it down. Play. Yeah, it's quite small. So let's move my... oh, that looks okay. Let's just move my game over here, see if we can... Damaging player. Oh, and it's disappeared. It's disappeared because I walked into it. That means we haven't done the collision layers. So robot crab. Collision. We're not the player. We're not the world. We're the enemy. So we're on layer 4. We can interact with the player and we can interact with the world. We need to do the same thing with the player detectors. So into collision. So I've clicked player detector front. Into collision. We are the enemy. We can interact with the player. Player detector head. Into collision. We are, so unselect player. We are the enemy. We can interact with the player. I'm going to let these two interact with the world as well. So if it bumps into a wall, it's going to change direction. So back into player detector front. So I can interact with the player. I've already selected that, and I can interact with the world. Into player detector rear. Into collision. I'm an enemy. And I can interact with the player, and I can interact with the world. I also think it's a bit small. So if I click into Robot Crab, I think what I might do is go into Transform and just scale it up to a factor of 1.2. Let's try 1.2. Right, now we'll play our game again. Yeah, it's a bit bigger. It's gone through the floor. So I'll have to change that. Damaging the player. Not damaging the player. Damaging the player. Not damaging the player. Can I destroy it? And yes. So when I jump on its head, it disappears from the game. Okay, I don't want it on the floor though, so let me just click it and move it up. Try it again. move it over. So I can take damage from that side. I can take damage from that side. And I can jump on the middle. And it disappears. Okay, I'm going to call that progress. I hope to see you in the next section.